Third part of this fourth lesson on change, multiplicity, and causality, and knowledge of this very powerful notion of act and power. We continue. Only it would be said, to go further, this explanation of the diversity of beings is incomplete, because we only saw the diversity of beings at the level of essences, which corresponds to species, in fact, but does not tell us about the diversity of individuals in the same species. Indeed, the essence is what makes the horse is horse, that the lilac is lilac, that the man is man. But man, there are quantities of individuals who all have the essence of man. Likewise, horses, there are quantities of individuals, and even before that, quantities of varieties, in which varieties there are quantities of individuals. And likewise, lilacs, there are a lot of it. The essence is what corresponds to a species. It is through it that we are part of this or that species. If I am a man, it is because I have the essence of man. And so with the notions of power and act in relation to the absolute being, we have given the reason for the diversity of the essences of beings, that is to say, of species, but that does not give us the reason for the diversity of individuals in the same species, because all individuals in the same species have the same essence. There is nothing that makes a difference between a man and another man from the point of view of the essence, because they both have exactly the same essence, which makes that they are both men in the same way, no more and less, with all that implies. And our demonstration gives no reason why there are two distinct individuals in the same species. Well, it is still this two notion of power and act that will give us the reason for distinguishing individuals in the same species. And to achieve this, we will do it as before. That is to say, starting from the change to lead to this multiplicity of individuals in the same species, always using the notion of power and act, discovering those of matter and form. Earlier, we talked about the change and the multiplicity of beings in general. There it is about the change and the multiplicity of individuals in the same species. We start with the change. Now, when we change individuals in the same species, when we go from one individual to another, what happens? For an animal, for example, an individual dies, another is born. This is called the cycle of generation and corruption. However, as in any change, as we have already noticed, there is something that changes, that goes from A to B, and something that remains the subject. And that, for the good reason that a change cannot be something absolute. For there to be something that changes, A that becomes B, there must be something that remains a subject. In order for a young animal to become older, for there to be this change of age, there must be a being that changes age. Change cannot be achieved in an absolute way. In any change, there is something that changes and something that remains the subject. What changes disappears, A, to make room for something else, B. For example, the white color of the skin in someone who tans gives way to the brown color. In any change, there is something, A, which leaves its place to something else, B, in a subject, which remains what it is. Like the man who tans remains man while he tans. That's right. What happens in generation and corruption? Well, on the day from an animal, we have noticed the matter remains. Well, what animated this matter to form the animal has disappeared, which we are obliged to recognize without any doubt by the different fragrance between a living animal and a dead animal. Between a living animal and a dead animal, in fact, the only difference is that there is no longer in the matter of the animal's corpse what made the animal living, which organized the matter to form this animal, like a rabbit or a deer. This extra thing which makes the body of all living things alive, Aristotle called form. And what remains after this is simply called matter. And Aristotle called these names, in comparison with a statuary. Take the example of a sculptor who would sculpt a marble wolf. The sculptor could only give the exterior shape of the wolf to the marble, a shape that one could call geometric. But that is not what will make it a real wolf. What is true in all this is the marble, and the external shape, which was given on the outside of the marble, if one can say, by the artist's chisel. But it will never be true wolf. What does it take to make a real wolf? We need matter, and something that makes this matter be organized to form a real wolf. It is not in our power to do such things, but by supposition. If we had this power to do a true wolf, there would have to be an artist who is not only able to print a form external to a material already made up, like marble, but who is able to print these forms through all the material, thought the material of this form, so to speak, so that this material is completely as impregnated with this form, so that the result is a real world and not marble with an only external form. You understand? We can thus see a little what is this form, by which the wolf is a real wolf, and not only an appearance. We see the difference in the marble wolf statue. There is still the nature of marble, and there is only an external appearance of the wolf. While in the real wolf, it is really the nature of the wolf who is there. All the material is impregnated, so to speak, with this nature of the wolf. We see that these considerations are not views of the mind, which would have no correspondence in reality, since we noticed a flagrant difference, quite obvious, between a living animal and the corpse of this animal, a wolf, for example. Between the dead wolf and the living wolf, there is no difference except what animated matter. When the wolf was alive, which is no longer when the wolf died. I have a difficulty with A and I in English. There is not in French. The material is exactly, I hope you understand. Well, the material is exactly the same. If we do a comparative chemical analysis, we would see that in the corpse there are all the chemical elements that there were when the wolf was alive. The only difference is the thing that made the chemical elements in the living wolf come together in cells, organs, blood, bone, skin, muscles. In short, everything that makes a real wolf alive. Even medicine, even biology cannot answer these questions. It's not their role. They are only interested in the functioning, the how. But what makes the difference between this living animal and the same dead? They know nothing about it, except that before there was a functioning called the life, and after, no more functioning. But we understand that a living being is more than a functioning. There is something that makes this being have its own functioning, which does not come from elsewhere than from itself. An automobile engine made by a man also has a certain functioning, and even if it has a certain functioning by itself during a time, that does not last long. It is necessary to refuel, oil, water. It is not able to find it on his own like an animal. Only on his own, like an animal. He does not reproduce like an animal. He does not arise from another engine like an animal. In short, he does not have autonomy of its own. The little that it has is closely linked to human intervention. The animal has its own functioning, which comes from itself. This is what characterizes a living being, because the philosophical definition of a living being is that such a being moves itself. The term moving being taken in the broad sense of any change, like growth of the young animal to become an adult. There is something in the animal which makes it capable of all this animal activity on its own. First, in itself, to function in quotation marks, to have this life in it, which allows him, among other things, this continual renewal of cells, and then all this external activity, very complex in higher animals, like in wolves or foxes, with, among other things, locomotion. There is something in the very real animal at the origin of all this, which makes this matter so animated, to give this or that animal with all its activities, and that we call the form, something that permeates matter to its root, to its bottom, so to speak, so that all matter is sucked in it, to give such nature to such an animal, or such other nature to such other animal. And this is something quite real, which we are oblivious to admit as the unmistakable difference between a living animal and a dead animal. We thus see how nothing should be added to these metaphysical realities to understand them as they are. It is not a question of seeing the form as a cloud, a shadow, or something of this kind, but only at this glaring difference between a living animal and a dead animal, and which causes the material of such an animal to be impregnated with it, to give such an animal of such nature. It is all the less necessary to see something sensitive with this reality, that it is totally immaterial, which, moreover, is logical, since it is something other than matter, which permeates, animates matter, so that the whole gives such a living being. Sorry, I will make light. This is called form, and we started from living beings to better understand, but we must extend this discovery to all body beings. Let's go back to the marble in which our artist carved a very similar wolf. This marble wolf looks like a wolf. It is not a real wolf, but marble in real marble. Why? Well, because he has the nature of marble. It is his nature to be marble. Well, the wolf in marble is not his nature to be a wolf. And what makes marble marble? That is, that it has the nature of marble. We can extend this notion of form there too, which will permeate a raw material so that the result is that being of such a nature that we call marble. And therefore, inert beings also are composed of matter and form, of a form which gives this matter to be of such nature, which makes the result of this composition of form and matter, either marble, or flint, or crystal, something which is not in our power, but which is quite real. We see, on the other hand, that this matter, to which the form is united, is not a matter constituted to give a being of such nature. If the wolf in marble is not a real wolf, it is because its material is already constituted. It already has the nature of marble. For it to be a real wolf, the form must go in form to the very bottom of the matter, so that the whole being is a real wolf, so that the whole being is a real wolf. The whole being up to the bottom, we would say, of the material. This is why there, in this metaphysical discovery, one should not see matter as one usually sees it, just as one should not see the form as one usually sees it, as a geometric form. One must see their matter as devoid of any form, of any nature, because it is a form which will give it the nature of the being, which will be made up of it. That's why it's called the raw material, or a fresh material. These notions are very difficult to conceive, and therefore you should not be surprised if you find it difficult to do so. This is normal, even for the greatest doctors. St. Augustine himself says that it is very difficult, that it must be grasped at the cutting edge of the intelligence. The notion of raw material, moreover, is not even conceivable by itself, since it has no nature by itself, and that the object of intelligence is a being, and there is practically no more being, since there is no nature, essence. But we are obliged to admit it, as we have just done, because the form must permeate this matter to the bottom of itself, which it could not do if the matter already had a certain nature, however little determined. We understand what are these two realities. The form and the matter of the body being never exist in an isolated state at this matter, since it has no nature by itself, since it is the form that gives it. We will see the particular case of the form. This is how we discovered these two realities, which are form and matter in body beings, by change, by the obligation in which we are to suppose in every change some things that changes and some things that remains. And in the cycle of generation and corruption, we see that something remains, matter, like the corpse of a living being, and something that changes, that is to say the form, which is lost at the death of the living being, and which comes into existence at his birth, at his conception. We'll see how in other courses. We will see that this form which joined to the raw material gives such being of such nature. We see that this form, in fact, gives nature to the corporeal being. And as we know that nature, essence, and substance are the same thing, we call it the substantial form, as opposed to the accidental form, which is only an added form, like that of the wolf in the marble. The shape of the wolf in marble is an accidental shape, which is as added to the nature of marble, where the shape of the real wolf, which makes the wolf a real wolf, which makes the wolf a real wolf, is a substantial form, because it gives it its substance, its nature. This is how we discovered these extremely important realities in philosophy, that has a substantial form as a raw material, or first matière. In French, matière première, materia prima in Latin, materia prima. And we see that these are not conceptions of the mind, but realities that we were forced to admit by observation in reality, by differences in the change. The substantial form in living beings is called, from the more particular name of soul, âme in French, une âme, which comes from the Latin anima, to say that through it the living corporeal being is animated. In philosophy, every living being has a soul, that is to say, plants, animals, and man. Obviously, it is not of the same nature in plants, animals, and humans. We will see how, but it is the same generic name to designate that give life in living beings. It shocks a bit our usual way of seeing things, where we only speak of soul for man, but if we refer to the definition, we understand why we can also attribute it to animals and plants. We will see the difference with man. In man it is a spiritual soul. After this introduction to the notions of matter and form, let us return to our initial problem of distinguishing individuals in the same species, which our introduction will help us to understand. We have shown the reason for the distinction of beings in general, with this very strong notion of act and power, by saying that each nature is a kind of imitation of the absolute being to be such or such a particular nature. But we noticed that they did not give us the reason for distinguishing individuals in the same species. Because all the individuals of the species have the same essence, as all men in the species man have the essence of the man. What is the reason for distinguishing individuals in the same species in bodily beings? Such as, for example, the reason for distinguishing men in the species man. Well, we will take this notion of power and act and combine them with the notion of matter and form that we have just discovered, which will give us this reason for distinguishing individuals in the same species. Indeed, what distinguishes individuals in the same species like man? It is not the essence, as we have just said, because from this point of view, there is absolutely no difference. All men are men as well as each other. Now, what is essence? It is nature. And what gives nature in a body being, as we have just seen, is form, united to matter. And therefore, it is not the form which gives individuals to be individuals, because they all have the same, since it is what gives nature, which is the essence, in fact, by which there is no difference between individuals of the same species. And so all that remains is matter, and in fact, what differentiates one individual from another, as in men, for example, is that we do not all have the same portion of matter. We all have matter, so we are bodily, but we don't all have the same portion of matter. And this is what makes the form of one man not the same as that of another, because each inform a different portion of matter in one and in the other. You know, the form inform a different portion of matter in one and in the other. It is said that the raw material is the principle of individuation. That is the reason for individuality in bodily beings. And we'll see how we find our notion of power and act. In fact, what is matter in a bodily being, if not what is potentially capable of receiving such and such a form? Matter, in fact, as we have said, is something which has no form by itself, since it is distinguished from form, because it has no nature, and therefore the raw material is potent in all forms, since it has none and can be matter of any body being. You know? For this reason, it is said that the raw material is pure power, because it has no determination except that of being able to all body being to make it corporeal. It is the very last rank of all beings, the most opposite from the ontological point of view to God, which is pure act. On the one hand, God, pure act, and on the other, raw material, pure power. Between the two, all the intermediate beings will be composed of act and power, with more or less act and more or less power. We will speak again about this subject. This is how the distinction of beings is explained metaphysically from these very strong notions of power and act. The power of being, which limits being to this or that particular being, to give such being of such essence, with existence and power, possibility of the essence, the raw material, to give such and such an individual in such pieces, thanks to the form which is act. There is how magnificently Aristotle solved these problems, otherwise insoluble, without which philosophy was blocked for a long time. All these notions that we have just found come from the notion of being. We saw the last time that from this notion did not derive only other notions, but also principles, and above all, the principle of identity and the principle of contradiction, which is its negative form. Principles which serve as guarantors of truth in knowledge, because it is by no respecting them, by no keeping them, that we fall into error. Very important. We will now see other very important principles in metaphysics. One principle, in fact, the four causes, and another principle which follows from the causes. This principle is the principle of raison d'être, principe de raison d'être in French, which says that what is not by itself is by something else. Very important. We will prove the existence of God with that. Very, very powerful. This is an extremely important principle which will allow us to demonstrate, yes, I said that here, to demonstrate the existence of God in the 11th course. It is quite obvious by itself, because if a thing is neither by itself nor by something else, one does not see how it could be. Because apart from it and the rest, that is to say of everything, there is nothing. There therefore remain only these two possibilities of being by itself or by something else. And since a thing cannot be both ways at the same time, that is to say, at the same time by itself and by something else, because it is contradictory, it remains that it is either one way or the other. We can see in passing that this principle only holds if we respect the principle of contradiction. Otherwise, if the same thing can be and not be at the same time, the same thing can at the same time be by itself and not be by itself, that is to say by something else. We don't understand what a principle is. It is something which is at the origin of something else, without being the cause, by which must necessarily precede it, as dawn is the principle of the day, but not its cause, which is the night. Thus the principle of identity and the other principles are things which must necessarily precede knowledge, and if they are first principles, precede all knowledge, so that knowledge may be what it should be, without being the cause, as the principle of identity is the principle of all knowledge, without which knowledge would not be what it is, without being the cause of knowledge being reality, we will see, as it is the cause of the principle of identity. Since the principle of identity is what it is thanks to the being. The cause is that whereby a thing is what it is. There is not. Ah, si. Si, c'est bon, it's good. We say that the cause is more than a principle. No, I have in advance. No, actually. The cause is that whereby a thing is what it is. We see that the cause is more than a principle. A principle is necessary, but it only precedes, whereas a cause effectively contributes to what a being is. A cause, then, is what a thing in its existence depends on, without which that thing would not be. When we speak of cause, we think in general of the efficient cause, which acts so that a thing is. But if we take the precise definition, that a cause is what a thing depends on in its being, which contributes to a thing being, we then find four notions which correspond to this definition. Indeed, what contributes to what a thing is, it is not only the agent who will act to that the thing comes into existence, but also what will compose it. What the thing is made of also contributes to the thing being, and therefore responds well to the definition of cause. Well, yes, it is form and matter which contribute well that a bodily being is what it is, deep within itself. For a bodily being is what it is by its form, which gives it to have such a sense, such nature, and by its matter, which gives it to be corporeal. Form and matter called formal cause and material cause, are two constituent causes of the corporeal being, which are, so to speak, within itself. And that is why they are called intrinsic causes. They are, at the same time, the very first principles of corporeal reality. That is to say, beyond which there are no others. With that, we are at the bottom of being, at the bottom, at the root. We can see all the interest of such a perspective. We can open here a parenthesis on modern science, which thinks it will find the secrets of nature when it has found the very first components of matter. And for that, manufactures increasingly powerful cyclotrons to break the particles down to their very first components, and finally be at the root of bodily reality. But science, as it is pompously called, is grossly mistaken for two reasons. First, because the corporeal being is composed not only of matter, but also of form. And so, it is not because we have found the very first material components of the bodily beings that we will have discovered the secrets of nature, because an element as essential as matter is neglected, that is to say the form, and even much more dispensable, since it is a form which gives nature to being with all its properties, while matter only gives it to be body. Secondly, because an essential property of matter being to be extended, and extension being infinitely divisible, we can divide matter as much as we want. We can always divide it again. Science has not finished looking to this direction. It is not close to finding the secrets of nature. In other words, it is embarking on a dead end. This is probably again a ruse of the Prince of Darkness to lead the human spirit astray. And what a pity to see a large number of our better young people run to the schools, believing that they are obtaining the summum of knowledge by doing calculation of the matter. The other two causes are causes external to the body being, so-called extrinsic causes. There are the efficient cause and the final cause. The efficient cause is what brings the thing into existence. It is the best known. It is not difficult to understand. For example, the efficient cause of the table is the carpenter. The efficient cause of the good meal we had at noon is the stove. The final cause either is not very difficult to understand. It is what the efficient cause aims to do what it does. For example, the final cause of the table is the carpenter's conception of it in his mind. Or it is the idea like a cook has in a good cake, as of a good cake, before making it. Sorry. She has the idea of the cake first in her design, and then actually realizes it. Likewise, the project of an entrepreneur is the final cause of this project, which he first has in his head, and which he will then try to achieve. The final cause is what the efficient cause aims to achieve. We deduce several extremely important things from this final cause. Sorry. First, it is that it is always, first of all, in an intelligence which conceives it, and then in the thing when it is carried out. As the table is first of all in the intelligence of the carpenter who conceives it, and then in reality when it is realized. And this principle, final cause, first in intention, last in execution, because it is when the thing is completed that it is reached. We also understand that the final cause is often confused with the formal cause, because the formal cause, which gives nature to the thing, as to the table, this is what the efficient cause aims for, in fact, before its execution. In parentheses, the form of the table is a form accidental form, not a substantial form. If you have not understand. And then we see that the final cause is the cause of the causes, as one said. Because it in only and then we see that the final cause is the cause of the causes, we repeat, as one said, because it is only through it that the efficient cause will set in motion to achieve something. If, in fact, a being endowed with intelligence has no plan, he will do nothing, and the efficient cause then realizes from this final cause the conceived corporeal being, which is composed of matter and form. So, in the order of realization of a thing, we have firstly the final cause, secondly the efficient cause, thirdly the material cause and the formal cause together, since they cannot exist one without the another, which constitutes the bodily being. One further draws from this consideration the principle of finality, an extremely important principle which says that nothing is done without a goal, which proves in a certain way the existence of God. Indeed, if the final cause is the very first cause, without which nothing would happen, and if it is necessary in an intelligence, it follows that the cause of everything is an intelligence, which has produced everything either by itself or through other intelligences. The theory that the world comes by chance without any intelligence is a complete aberration, straight out of the imagination of man, without any rational foundation. The important, we speak again soon of that. The importance of these causes for knowledge is extremely important. For it is only through them that the question is fully answered, what it is. That man always arises from the child to the scholar. If you answer the question what it is about a thing by the four causes, you answer it exhaustively. You reach the question in the heart, since it is the four things that contribute to the thing being, no more and no less. And so, when we know everything that contributes to something, either intrinsically or extrinsically, we know everything that concerns it. As we said, science of 10 only 6 to know the material cause. As we said, science often only seeks to know the material cause, and also the efficient cause, neglecting the formal cause and the final cause, which are the most important. Since the final cause is the cause of the causes, and the formal cause, which gives nature, and therefore the intelligibility of being, which makes us understand what it is, which answers the question, what is it? Let's say that science does not ignore it completely, because it studies its properties, but it is often descriptively, that is to say, rather outwardly, and not in the heart of the being. As a result, it misses the essential. In parentheses, we not say that science do nothing. They are completely one to another, philosophy and science, but they must work together to discover the very exact reality. Still, a principe, malheureusement, comme on dit en anglais, malheureusement, but it is deplorable that metaphysics appears to scientists like a dream. No, not like science, because it is not well known. I shut the parenthesis. Still, a principle which is not of extreme importance, but which may be useful, is a principle of reciprocity of causes, quite difficult to apply, but very enlightening for certain problems. It means that the material and formal causes on the one hand, and final and efficient on the other hand, are reciprocal, that is to say, act in turn on one another. The material cause acts on the formal cause, and the formal cause on the material cause. For example, if the form gives the matter to form such a being of such nature, The matter gives the form to formal body being. It is very difficult to understand. We'll talk about it again, about the mind. We will have a good application of it about grace, to understand that grace does not suppress freedom in a sinner, but that freedom is not alone either the cause of conversion. Freedom is the material cause of conversion, and grace the formal cause. Otherwise, we fall into the heresy of Calvin on the one hand, or the heresy of Pelagius on the other. We will explain it in due course. Likewise, the efficient and final causes are reciprocal, and the efficient cause sets in motion, as we have seen, it is thanks to the final cause. And if the final cause is what it is in the efficient cause, it is because the efficient cause adopts it. So much for the fundamental notion of metaphysics. We can see that they are at the same time very deep, quite difficult to understand, and at the same time very simple. Let's stick to this simplicity. There is only the way we will know them best, that is to say, in all their purity. Let's not try to make too many applications yet. Let's first get to know them well in themselves. Not every worker will try to use his tools until he knows how they work. Otherwise, he risks getting hurt and doing a bad job. If we work well on this notion in order to get to know them better, and even better, if we come to possess them, and even better, to master them, we have here extremely powerful means to understanding and dealing with most of the major problems of human life, and a royal entrance to the spiritual world, angels and God, and obviously powerful weapons against error. May the Lord be blessed forever. Amen. Goodbye. Soon for the next lesson.